Excellent.
Just start talking?
Yes.
So if you're watching this video now, you're obviously thinking about joining the conference on wheels and coming to Silicon Valley or participating in one of Niki's tours. I was in your spot. I was watching other people's videos. I didn't know whether or not I should come. And I just took a chance and I let opportunity take its course. And I'm really glad I did because I had an amazing experience. I got to come here for a week and experience the mindset of Silicon Valley. I got to meet with venture capitalists. I got to meet with startup founders. I got to go to the Google headquarters, and what you see is there's a real community of thought leadership, of inspiration, of creativity and positivity going on in the Silicon Valley. And so it was really a great opportunity to peek behind the curtain of Silicon Valley, which you hear so much about, and really understand what the place is about. It was very much a great experience, and I'm so glad I did it, and I would do it again. And if you're watching this video and you're thinking about joining Niki for a tour, I would encourage you to do it also.
Niki's program, Silicon Valley Inspiration Tours, was absolutely incredible.
Thank you, Niki, for a wonderful week.
Thanks a lot.
I had an amazing day with Niki. This was an absolutely fantastic time. Thanks a lot.
And I would really recommend everyone to enjoy this experience. That's it.
So wonderful that you can make it to join me here for this quick little session to introduce you to Silicon Valley. I'd like to introduce myself to you. I'm Niki Skene. I'm Austrian. I live in Dubai and in San Francisco. And I live this nomad life to make people unignorable. In my former life, I was an admin, and I was a little frustrated in this advertising world, which is usually set up in a way that companies approach the ad agency with a finished product, like this bottle of San Pellegrino, and then they say to the ad agency, tell a nice story so people buy that water. And I thought, when I know San Pellegrino well and I know my customer well, I want to sit on the table a lot earlier and, for example, go to the people who produce San Pellegrino and introduce them to this idea of maybe some flavored water would be ready for the market. I wanted to be already part of the product development. And that's what I framed in this idea of the innovation agency as a next generation of the ad agency. During that time, I was already strongly involved in the TED community, and TED invited me to be a TEDx ambassador. And not so far from where I am right now, I'm in Dubai at the moment, and not so far from here in Doha, there was an event in 2012 where 850 TEDx organizers from over 120 countries came together to get this feeling of community and shape the community. And it was a beautiful event. And I was introduced to an Austrian who lives in San Francisco. And I shared with her the idea of the innovation agency, the next generation agency. And she said, well, come to San Francisco, I introduce you to a few people. And that's what I did. And I came there and I got a few connections, and this beautiful thing with Silicon Valley as an Austrian, where you experienced when you approach someone with an idea, he or she will give you 5 reasons why you will fail. Whereas in Silicon Valley, these people will connect you with 5 others who might bring you on a next level with your idea, with your vision, with your company. And I had this experience in November 2012. And at the end of the week, I was pumped and I was so excited. And I felt like this is exactly what I want to do for people. This is the experience that I just had. Other people should have access to this as well. And I co-founded with Mario Herger the Austrian Innovation Center, Silicon Valley, and they later turned into Silicon Valley Inspiration Tours, where we started this program of customized meetings for a group of no more than 10 people to introduce them to people working on technology that will impact their industry or get generally on hypotheses on the future of the industry, to grow to the next level. And this eventually in 2018 turned into Conference on Wheels. And I'm doing this now in New York, in London, in Helsinki, in Dubai, and in Hong Kong and Shenzhen. And it's a beautiful global journey. I'm very privileged to be part of that journey. And I'd like to go back to Silicon Valley with you for the next 20, 30 minutes to share a bit about why Silicon Valley is so special and what Silicon Valley is all about. When you go to or when you ask someone what is Silicon Valley, you will get two different answers. And there's one group of people who will always say Silicon Valley is all about money. And there's another group of people who are equally important, and they say Silicon Valley is all about grand global challenges, big ideas, big dreams, big visions, all about solving a problem. What they both have in common, and that's something that brings me to the first point of what is special in Silicon Valley, they value data over opinion. They think in data company mindset. And why is it so important to think like a data company? Because we live in a time where problems and technology are both evolving at exponential pace. And we humans are not built to understand exponential growth. And with a linear mindset, we have no chance in shaping the future, not even talking about being part of the future, to be honest. So what is that differentiation we distinguish between the two companies, the linear organization and the exponential organization? Let me go into this for just a minute. I think that framework helps you better understand Silicon Valley and where with the parts I'm going to introduce you as we move on tonight. So linear organizations, basically, I have this idea of scaling products. They identify their customer base, they identify a market and a product, and they want to sell this product into the market as many times as possible. And if that works, they call it scaling. Exponential organizations, they think in marketplaces. They create ecosystems, because a marketplace with an operating system for a marketplace attracts people who do things that we can do, and they do it as well. And that helps the whole setup growing at exponential pace, which is why they are called exponential organizations. And of course, there is so much more to tell, and I'm personally very excited about exonomics, the principles of an era where exponential functions are shaping technology and industries. Back to Silicon Valley, that's what we're about. Maybe some basics, what actually is Silicon Valley, because there's San Francisco, and then there is something called Silicon Valley, which is not even a geographical entity. It's geographically called Santa Clara Valley. And then on the other side of the San Francisco Bay, there's the so-called East Bay. And you can say, be strict and say Silicon Valley is from San Jose to Redwood City, and you can say San Francisco is part of it. You can say Berkeley, Oakland, Fremont, so the East Bay is part of it as well. I wouldn't be so strict and dividing these three. When I talk about Silicon Valley, I talk about San Francisco, I talk Silicon Valley, I talk about East Bay or the San Francisco Bay Area. What's worth mentioning is that there is this one road called Sand Hill Road, and I think 25% of US venture capital is traded on just this road. In whole Silicon Valley, this is a 12 million population, about a third of all US venture capital is traded. So that's the first thing. There's a lot of money, which is why half of the people say Silicon Valley is all about money. The coin Silicon Valley was phrased, the term Silicon Valley was coined by a guy called Rolf Wirst, although there is maybe a discussion if it was Don Höfler or Rolf Wirst. However, they were friends. So it has been coined in 1970 with roots in telegraph, radio, commercial and military technology. Hewlett-Packard or Hewlett and Packard, they basically started the Silicon Valley. There's still the house, the garage in Palo Alto that you can visit with a plaque, and this is called the birthplace of Silicon Valley. Stanford University plays a huge role, founded in 1885. And what we use a lot about from Silicon Valley is the term Moore's Law, and that's been coined by the co-founder of Intel, Gordon Moore, in 1968. What else is there to say? A lot of headquarters. It's difficult to figure out which of those two highlights. Actually, I shouldn't highlight NVIDIA as well, because it's the biggest company in the world right now. So there are a huge amount of really, really big players who shape many, many futures of many industries, and a ton of universities. And again, to highlight Singularity, Stanford, Berkeley, UC California, Santa Cruz, and so on and so forth. So many academic institutions. And that's also important because the universities in Silicon Valley work very strongly together with the companies to create innovation. So what's that Silicon Valley myth? And it's not moving your startup to San Francisco Bay Area or to Silicon Valley that doesn't turn you into the next unicorn. As a matter of fact, when you roughly look into the numbers, there are 1,000 incorporations every week, of which 9 just survive 6 months, which could be called a failure engine or maybe a learning machine. Depends on how you'd like to look at it. But it's not necessarily that everything that moves to San Francisco or Silicon Valley is a success story. But that's part of this whole ecosystem, part of this whole understanding of Silicon Valley. So let me talk briefly about method and culture. Method, very short, because this is not a lecture on how to run your business. I'm sure you're familiar with design thinking 3.0. Basically means that you have a very strong factor of technology or artificial intelligence in the process. Growth hacking is systematic experimentation, and not as a project, but part of the DNA of the organization. Organizations like Facebook have hundreds of experiments running at any given time. It basically means that you determine where do you want to go, what is your factor of success, how do you get there, and how do you learn from the hypothesis if changing, continuing, or discontinuing is the right choice. And that's basically exponential learning in a nutshell. The next generation of growth hacking is product-led growth. Again, I'm not going to go into this, and this all the three fill more than one session. But these are three methodological pillars in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley. What's way more interesting is talking about the culture, because it's a strong mindset. And I love this mindset of asking yourself what makes sense. I'd like to give you one example, because I think most of the people I talk to have this one example in common as a factor of annoyance, and that's post-COVID, where do you work? Do you work at home or do you work at the office? Because during COVID, everyone learned that working at home actually works, and now offices want the workers back, the teams back into the offices. And now we have this stupid compromise. A compromise, by the way, is a solution, I think, where each party is equally unhappy. So it's not a good solution. And now we have this stupid compromise where you have to stay at the office or come to the office 3 days of the week, and you can work from home or anywhere else 2 days a week. And I don't think that makes any sense at all. When you ask what makes sense, you have to understand what is office good at and what are people who work good at. And I think people who work are every day in the morning are good at figuring out, where am I going to be productive today? No employer needs to tell their employees where they're going to be productive. You know, if it's your bedroom, if it's your kitchen, if it's a coffee shop, if it's a park, or if it's maybe your office desk. You know this every single day. But what people are not good at is figuring out where they can bounce ideas, where they can meet to find someone who they can spar with. And this is a beautiful example of a co-working space in San Francisco. It's called Shack 15. It was very difficult to actually get a photo with only a few people, because it's jam-packed. The people, when they're working or when they're talking, don't overly enjoy being on a photo. It's a nice setup. It's beautiful. You have a view to the Bay Bridge, but also it's a huge room that looks like a living room with many seating areas and couches and sofas, and it looks like a lounge, and it doesn't look like a workspace. But people come here, they bounce ideas, and when you know what needs to be done, again, you know where you want to do this. And I think this is a beautiful example of asking yourself, where does this lead when you ask yourself, what makes sense? What is it that we're actually good at, and what is it that others are good at or we're not good at? I hope that makes sense so far. I'm going to share a few tweetable quotes. I'm sure you heard a lot of them before in the past. One of them is falling in love with the problem, not with the solution. What's basically meant is that I'm involved in several programs that incubate startup ideas, moonshots, if you want to call it that way. And 80% of them start with, we have an app, or we're using AI. It always starts with technology. It always starts with the solution. And they're so much in love with the solution that the problem they're tackling is actually a side part of the story. And that's something where I realize, okay, this might be quoted a lot and put a lot on different social media walls, but it's still something people need to understand and learn what it actually means. That you don't start with the solution, you don't start with the app, you don't start with AI, you don't start with the execution. You start with, what is it that we're actually doing? When you get introduced to people in Silicon Valley, you hear a lot as an introduction, the problem I'm solving is, or what I do for people is, as opposed to, I'm an app company or I'm an AI company and whatnot. I mentioned this idea of playing it forward when I shared the story of the 5 people that I got connected, who connected with more, and at the end of the week I had 20 meetings. It comes from the venture capital community. When you're very successful, the question is, how much more money do you need? And they said, okay, it's part of the thing we would like to do is support a company financially. And we don't want equity, we don't want money back. The only thing we want is, if that company is successful, the founder of the company should also support someone else. And this idea of paying forward turned into a whole culture, and we call it play it forward. So when I ask you for a favor, you don't respond, what's in it for me? You just say, how can I help you? Because there will be this point where you need a favor from someone, and you're very, very glad if you don't have to answer what's in it for me. And if anyone is doing this, there is a phenomenon, we call it, if you want to raise the ships, you have to elevate the water. Everyone is coming on a higher level of learning, of growing, of moving on with their ideas and their companies and their projects. I'm Austrian and always struggling finding a good word for serendipity, but it basically means that despite the fact you don't know what's going to happen, who's going to speak, you say yes to an invitation for a dinner, for a conference, for whatever. You go to a place and you enjoy serendipitous moments. And of course, you can orchestrate serendipity. When you have a co-working space where there is a coffee shop, people go on a coffee break, and then there might be, as a startup founder, you might find a VC next to you or a student next to you, and you come and start a conversation, and you realize, hey, you actually are complementary, you can create something together. Sounds very constructed, but it's happening all the time. But also serendipity means that, for example, that when you come to this program, you don't even know who you're meeting. When you sign up for a tour, or let me repeat that, when you sign up for a conference, you make that choice depending on who's going to speak. So basically, the audience meet the speakers. When you sign up for a tour, you sign up for that experience because the speakers are chosen depending on the audience. That means that whoever comes to the tour determines what is going to be the program. Who are we going to meet? I don't know yet before people sign up if I'm going to have someone from health, someone from finance, someone from automotive, someone from retail, someone from nutrition. I don't know this yet. So it doesn't make sense to start programming a tour if the tour has to be very relevant for these people who are coming. So that's also a serendipitous choice, to sign up for something where you don't even know what is going to happen. And unlearn, that there's this guy who co-founded Google X, Astro Taylor. He said, the illiterate of the future are not those who can't read and write, but those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. And what it basically means is that you don't come into this program with, this is what I know, so give me more. You come into this program of like a sponge, like into a data room. And I have this I've been doing 206 tours in the last 12 years. So there are patterns that surface. On day one, on a 5 days tour, on day one, people say, I know. On day two, they say, yeah, that doesn't work that way where I'm from. It might work here, but it doesn't work where I'm from. On day three, they start asking questions. On day four, they get a little nervous but curious. On day five, they want to go home and execute. And that's kind of that are these dynamics. And it's so hard to let go of all the things you know on day one, because you know the process. I shared 3 processes. I'm sure you've heard of this before. And then when you hear of something that you know, that you're familiar with, that you're doing, it's very difficult to continue to listen. You know, we talk about attention span. Attention span of 3 seconds doesn't mean that your audience cannot listen for more than 3 seconds. It means that every 3 seconds-ish, they decide if they continue to listen. So now if you hear something that you know already, will you bear with me? Or will you go on your Facebook wall? Or will you walk away? Or will you do other things? And that kind of this opening up to unlearning, opening up to being a sponge is something that's crucial because it makes magic happen. Another thing that's really interesting is this fail forward meme that's been transported from Silicon Valley to Europe, and this idea of embracing failures and making mistakes fast and finding mistakes wonderful. I think this is not true. It is not honest. I don't think that anyone actually enjoys making mistakes. And I don't think if we celebrate fucker parties. And I enjoy all these formats. I think they're great and they're really important. But this still doesn't mean that we go home the next day, we really hope we're going to make a mistake very quick, because it's so satisfying to do something wrong. But if we reframe this into a mistake is basically just information, and that information tells us the way we did it did not work, we can move on, because when we just change it or just not do it at all. And that's what this idea of making mistakes in Silicon Valley is about. See it as a data point, make sure you document it, and then move on with that information and make new decisions. The perfectionism, or this desire of making something perfect, I think is one of the biggest problems that I see in Europe. The automotive industry in Europe is shaking, and I think one of the reasons they're shaking is they're trying to make cars better. They've always been doing good cars and perfect cars, and now they're trying to make them even better. But I don't think the race on the street literally is won by cars that are better. I don't think anyone needs better cars. I think people need something that's completely different. And when you start with something that's completely different, you only learn on the street, literally, if it works, how to improve it, how to make it better. You cannot complete the whole process from scratch and put it out there when there is no mistake. This is not happening. And I think it's one of the critical issues in parts of the world that are having a hard time letting go of what they're good at to figure out what else we can do. A friend of mine once said Silicon Valley is 120 square kilometers surrounded by reality. And we can smile on this, but actually, I think it makes a lot of sense. When you look into textbook entrepreneurship, an organization outside of Silicon Valley needs to make more money than the cost of revenue to stay in business. And in Silicon Valley, you've for sure heard from these companies, and Tesla was one of the companies for many years, who were actually losing money by every product they're selling. Amazon was losing money by every book they're selling for many years. Facebook didn't have a business plan in the beginning. So what is that huge difference if there is a company that keeps on getting so much money and doesn't even know where the money is coming from to pay that back? How can we comprehend this way of thinking that goes so far away from what we have learned as an entrepreneur, how we should run our company? And in Silicon Valley, a lot of companies are placing bets on the future. Here's a future scenario, and we think this is going to look like this. And as long as other people trust that this hypothesis, this bet on the future, has some grounds, they will put their money on it. Because it's a bit like gambling. And when you go to the casino, you know that the house always wins, but those who go home with a jackpot go home with a lot of money. It's also a bit like gambling. When you place a bet on the future will show, although we know a lot about the future, but at the end of the day, the market will show, the future will show. And these bets on the future get so much money that there is a point where it switches from bet to self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's why so many of these huge companies who shape the industry are coming from one corner of the world. And I'm not saying that there are other places in the world where you don't find innovative companies, but it's quite interesting that there is such a small area. It's 75 kilometers, such a small area that brings up so many impactful organizations. I think that's worth exploring. Well, what's this reality? And the reality is, and that's what people experience when they have an idea, when they go home from San Francisco, from a Silicon Valley experience, when they go home from a conversation, from a conference, people say, now you had a great week, now you go back to work. Or, no, we don't want that change. Vienna has been, not this year, but for many years, the city with the highest living standards in the world. Of course, you don't want to change that. You want to maintain the status. Every change is a threat. And that's the narrative. Change is a threat. So everything you'd like to change will have to go through a barrier of headwind. And I think it's important to be aware of this, because if you want to do something and you bounce back by the first blow that comes against you, maybe it's not really important for you to actually do it. I also see a lot of self-improvement books in circulation. The self-improvement business is a 3 billion per day business. That's people who go to Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi and all these other gurus who tell you in a beautiful Zoom call, YouTube video, or whatnot, how you can follow your dream and get closer to the destination, the big things, and how you're capable of doing everything. But the job of these books is to buy more books. The job of the Tony Robbins sessions is to show up at the next Tony Robbins session, not to go out there and actually do it. And I think it's important to know this. So ditch the self-improvement books. They will only make you feel miserable. Also, something that I hear a lot in this reality outside of San Francisco, the success stories from 10 years ago, the big achievements that are forgotten by most people, but not the person who had these big achievements. And when you embrace this mindset that you're as good as the last thing that you've done, it's good to celebrate it, but then move on and do the next great thing, as opposed to leaning back and say, I've done my share. I'm good. Thank you. So let me explain. Let's come to the point. I think that's the reason why you're here. Let me explain a little what's going on in San Francisco right now. And I'm going to share with you some snippets of conversations that I had in the last 6 months and in my last 10 tours that I had in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. This guy is the wonderful Raymond Lee. He holds together a community of 10,000 AI startup founders only in San Francisco. So when you look at that number, and according to Crunchbase, last year's venture capital on artificial intelligence, 50% of that money was invested in Silicon Valley. You can assume that it's fair to say that the biggest amount of AI talent is in San Francisco at the moment. So if you're interested in artificial intelligence, if artificial intelligence impacts your business, which I think it will, this is the time to have these conversations. This is the time to go there and have a seat on the table and engage with these people, meet these founders, meet these people who shape what's going on right now. Because I don't know if you followed, but OpenAI said that they have 12 announcements the next 12 days. One they just had last week. You can expect that the other 11 announcements will be huge as well. It's just begun. It has just begun. There is also a beautiful place called Circuit Lounge, the maker community, people who actually make physical stuff. They are very strong in robotics, for example. This is a huge place where you can go and start from scratch, and you learn how to build something. You follow your startup. You get out there with a prototype or with the first few working products and see what the market says about this. And it's amazing to visit that place and watch how people are immersed in, I don't know, there's so much on data company and so much on digital stuff, but nothing beats stuff that you can actually touch. Nothing beats things you can do with your hands. And it's so satisfying. Every time I walk through Circuit Lounge, I feel like I just want to stay there and build something. What might surprise you is that there is also a lot of responsibility. Mattis Wackernagel and the Global Footprint Network, we owe this guy the carbon footprint. That was his PhD. But also the Overshoot Day, which is the day where we have consumed everything that the Earth can replenish within a whole year. So ideally, this would be December 31st. This year, it was 1st of August. But when we look into Europe, I think somewhere in mid-May is the Overshoot Day of the developed world. And he looks into questions that ask a very simple question. That's what companies should be around in the future. And I love this idea of company should be successful when the more they are successful, the better it is for the planet. And there's actually a waste disposal company I think in Germany. They're responsible for 7 minutes on the Overshoot Day. So if they would stop operating, the Overshoot Day would be 7 minutes earlier, which is quite insane for just one company. And he just got awarded by the Nobel family for his work in sustainability, which is quite epic. You will also meet people like Jonathan Brill, who's a dear friend of mine, and also joins the tour as a co-host. He opens up with a talk, and he helps people packaging that experience of the week before they go home. And his book, Rope Waves, is extremely inspiring. And what he's saying is that there are individual manageable disruptions, changes, massive changes. But what's not manageable is if they're all happening at the same time. And that's what happens. That's what is happening right now. They're all happening at the same time. So he calls it rope waves. And he explains what that means for organizations and for leadership and for planning, and how you can pan out a 5 years plan to be relevant and successful as an organization. Of course, you meet startup founders like Deb, who is a Y Combinator startup founder with an extremely interesting company called Kria. And it's nice to hear from these young people, and you meet a lot of people who are nerds, a lot of people who are into data and understanding data and looking at data from different perspectives, how strong the factor human plays into the equation in the conversations that you have with these people. A company that's been around for many years is actually a Spanish company, and they have a very important outlet in Silicon Valley called Intelligence. They offer artificial intelligence as a service, and they produce real cases, like real AI cases, I think for 8 years now. And now we're talking about AI since 2022 when ChatGPT was launched. And when it's AI crazy, they've been doing this for many years. And it's really interesting to talk to these pioneers, to meet those who are around for such a long time and also manage to be more than relevant today after all what's going on with companies like OpenAI. As you are probably not surprised, AI is a huge topic. It's a huge foundation of all the conversations. And I really enjoyed the conversation with Christopher, who panned out the 3 generations of AI. He spoke about the algorithmic AI, and then he spoke about the transformers, and now about the agentic AI and what that means. And I think, I don't know how you feel about it, but it's different when you hear something and then you understand it, to you understand it that well that you can explain it to someone else. And how much sense does it make when you only, hard to say, but when you only understand it, but you can actually not make someone else understand as well. And unless you make someone else understand as well, maybe you haven't fully understood yet. And I'm sorry that I say you, because I don't even know on what level you are literate with artificial intelligence. And I'm sure some of you are doing really well, and some of you are just tapping their toes into this. But it's good to have these conversations that bring you on a level where you can talk about it, because you make different decisions when you understand it in a way that you can explain it. One of the most amazing humans I've met in San Francisco, and maybe in my life, is Esther Wojcicki. I don't know her name. I don't know if you know her name, but you probably know her daughters. One of her daughters passed by, sadly, last year. She was the CEO of YouTube. And the other daughter was the CEO and founder of 23andMe, the company that does DNA or pioneered DNA sequencing. And she used to be a teacher. She became Teacher of the Year. She became Teacher of the State. She became godmother of Silicon Valley. She wrote several books, and she talks about trust and how trust is the foundation of everything. And when you look into Silicon Valley companies and data companies and how bad the reputation is of data companies, you can put one and one together to understand how important it is to build upon trust and take trust as the highest asset that you have and you can have as an organization. We met another nomad last time who's consulting countries and governments and doing a really interesting job where he takes 1,400 parameters of an organization to make a real-life health check of that organization, and launching that probably as we speak. It's interesting how it all comes together too. There is a technology part, yes, but when we really want to get something done, it's about culture, leadership, and adaptability. And one of my favorite dudes in Silicon Valley, George Roth, Romanian. And again, you see the narrative, right? It's when you use AI without adding real value, it's a bubble. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't make sense. You just waste a lot of money. And I can remember the conversations about digital transformation. And I also felt like digital transformation can get quite risky because it's very expensive. But if you don't know why you're doing it and what to expect and where it leads you, you're not going anywhere. So what actually really happens next? And I hope this little journey of what is Silicon Valley and the people we meet ignited some curiosity, because we're going there again. We're going there again in January, where in the beginning of the year, the CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, is the biggest innovation event in the world, the most important innovation event in the world, I dare to say. And of course, when you watch the magician doing the trick, you want to know how he did it. So that's why after seeing how the future might look like, we go to San Francisco and have a 3-day Silicon Valley inspiration tour to learn the anatomy of innovation, to go home with this. I can do this. I will do this. This is how we'll do this. And these are the people that will be my network in San Francisco. And that's in January. And then our flagship tour, I used to call it campus tour, but I realized it's a little confusing because it's not university campus. It's not for students. It's actually a full feature Silicon Valley inspiration tour. There's one in March and one in August. And you can see the price tag here. I'm very transparent. This is what you pay. I only admit 10 participants, never more, because I don't think you can have one conversation with more than 10 people in the room. There's always subgrouping. It's very difficult to keep the level of understanding on one level with more than 10 people, which is why I've decided that I'm capping it. 10 participants is the maximum for all of the programs that I'm running. And this is Silicon Valley CS, and this is the Silicon Valley flagship tour in March and in August. And it's time to let the cat out of the bag, because I'm offering something for just 24 hours, and that's 20% discount. I don't do discounts. I don't think it's a good idea to do discounts, but I also think it's a good idea to do Christmas gifts. And Christmas is in front of the door. We just had the second Advent Sunday. So I'm giving for until tomorrow night, Pacific time, I'm giving 20% discount on the tours, which means not 7,500, but 6,000 for the CS and Silicon Valley tour, and 5,200 for the Silicon Valley tour. To help you understand what you get for the money, for CS, it's the ticket for the CS, and of course the curation of the program and transport during the tour. Basically everything is covered. The only thing that's not covered is your flights. So you have to put yourself to Las Vegas and to San Francisco, or just to San Francisco for the other tour. You have to figure out where you're staying. I can help you with a list of hotels, but I'm not a travel agent, so the booking is all on your hands, and whatever you eat is on your pockets as well. So meals, accommodation, and travel is not included. Everything else is part of that package. So how do you get it? You go to the website, and that's conferenceonwheels.com only now. And as you can see, this is just for the audience here. It's password protected, so you cannot get there any other way. And that's only today. And if you go there and sign up, we'll see each other in January, which would be pretty epic. And I hope you enjoyed this little journey to San Francisco, to the Silicon Valley Bay Area. I hope I could give you some momentum of excitement. I hope you can see my passion. I'm really obsessed in making this week memorable and important and sustaining for the group. I really care a lot about the day after the tour. It doesn't look like the day before the tour. You get a playbook. We call it playbook, which is an executive summary of every single conversation. So even 6 months later, you can revisit the meetings and re-experience and pick up your thoughts that you had. Because probably when you go back after a week being off the grid, there are a lot of emails waiting for you. I totally understand. But I want this experience to be impactful for you. And that's also what other people said about the tour. I heard quite often this week has changed my life. And I don't want to hear anything else than that, because that's the bar that I set for the experience of these 10 people. So thank you for being here. Thank you for spending the last 35 minutes with me. I hope it was of value for you. And I'm looking forward to see you in San Francisco very soon. Have a good night.